I knew something was wrong when I saw my wife quickly hide her phone as I walked into our bedroom. Jessica had been acting strange for weeks, but that night I accidentally overheard her whispering to someone about divorce attorneys and asset division. My stomach dropped as I heard her say, "Once the company valuation peaks next month, that is when I will file. His assets will be mine." In that moment, everything changed. I had a decision to make, and fast. Before I continue with this story, I want to know which state you are watching from. Hit the like button and subscribe so you do not miss any deep life lessons from this painful experience that completely transformed how I view relationships and trust. I met Jessica at a tech conference in San Francisco when we were both 26. I was working as a junior software engineer for a growing startup, and she was handling marketing for a competing firm. Our eyes locked across the crowded exhibition hall, and by the end of the day we had exchanged numbers. Her bright smile and ambitious personality drew me in immediately. We started dating, and everything felt perfect from the beginning. After 2 years of a wonderful relationship, I proposed on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The wedding was everything we had dreamed of, a beautiful beachside ceremony with close friends and family. We bought our first home together in the suburbs of San Francisco, a modest 3-bedroom house that we were incredibly proud of. We spent weekends painting walls, planting a garden, and making it truly ours. Those early days were filled with genuine love and excitement for our future together. My career took off over the next few years. I moved up in my company and eventually partnered with 2 colleagues to launch our own software development firm. The long hours and financial risk were difficult, but Jessica supported me throughout the process. She would bring dinner to the office during late nights and offered encouragement when deals fell through. Meanwhile, her own career in marketing flourished, and we became what our friends called a power couple. Our financial situation improved dramatically after the first few difficult years. The company secured several major clients, and our valuation increased substantially. We purchased a newer, larger house in a prestigious neighborhood, bought luxury cars, and set up retirement accounts. We took memorable trips to Hawaii, toured Europe, and spent 3 amazing weeks in Japan. We talked about having children and planned to start trying within a year. Life seemed perfect, but looking back I can see the warning signs that I missed. About 6 months before everything fell apart, Jessica started working late more frequently. At first, I thought nothing of it. She had always been dedicated to her career, and I respected her work ethic. But these late nights became more common, and her explanations grew increasingly vague. Jessica changed the password on her phone, something she had never done before. She also began placing her phone face down whenever she was around me. When I would enter a room, she would quickly end calls or switch screens on her laptop. At dinner, she avoided discussions about our future plans and changed the subject whenever I brought up finances or family planning. She even forgot our anniversary that year, something completely out of character for her. She had always been the one who planned elaborate celebrations for special occasions. When I mentioned it, she apologized half-heartedly and blamed her workload. Around the same time, she started purchasing expensive designer clothes and jewelry without discussing it with me. While we could afford it, this spending spree was unusual for her. I tried everything to reconnect with my wife. I arranged romantic dinners at her favorite restaurants, but she seemed distracted throughout the meals, checking her phone constantly. I suggested marriage counseling, thinking we might be experiencing a rough patch that professional guidance could help us through. Jessica dismissed the idea, immediately claiming she was too busy with work obligations. I bought her thoughtful gifts, tried to engage her in conversations about our relationship, but nothing seemed to break through the wall she had built. Every attempt to address the growing distance between us was met with excuses, deflections, or irritation. I felt increasingly alone in our marriage, but I held on to hope that this was simply a temporary phase. My suspicions grew stronger when I accidentally saw a text message on her phone one morning when she was in the shower. Her phone lit up on the nightstand, and I glimpsed a message from an unknown contact that read, "Miss you already. Dinner again tomorrow." My heart raced as I considered the implications. Was my wife having an affair? I began to notice other troubling patterns. Jessica made phone calls exclusively from our bathroom, with the water running, or when she thought I was out of the house. One day, while sorting through mail, I found a receipt from an expensive restaurant downtown from a night when Jessica claimed she was working late. The receipt showed dinner for two and an expensive bottle of wine at 8:30 p.m. The most alarming discovery came when I used our shared laptop and found recent searches in the browser history for community property states and California Divorce Asset Division. I felt sick to my stomach. I just need to gather more financial information before I meet with him. I silently backed away, my mind racing. The woman I had loved for 8 years was calculating the most profitable time to leave me. I felt physically ill, but I knew I needed to learn more before confronting her. Over the next few days, I did some investigating of my own. I checked our browser history more thoroughly and found multiple visits to divorce law websites. Once the paperwork is filed, I can finally start my new life. The timing has to be perfect, though. His company is expected to double in value after the new product launch next month. My lawyer says I could be entitled to half of that if I time this right. My blood ran cold as she continued. I have an appointment with Arthur Goldstein next week. He is the best divorce attorney in the Bay Area. He has won huge settlements for his clients. I bought her thoughtful gifts, tried to engage her in conversations about our relationship, but nothing seemed to break through the wall she had built. Every attempt to address the growing distance between us was met with excuses, deflections, or irritation. I felt increasingly alone in our marriage, but I held on to hope that this was simply a temporary phase. My suspicions grew stronger when I accidentally saw a text message on her phone one morning when she was in the shower. One evening, while Jessica was showering, I found a folder hidden in her desk drawer containing printouts of our bank statements, investment accounts, and property deeds. She had highlighted certain sections and made notes about valuations in the margins. I decided to find out if she was actually meeting with divorce attorneys. One afternoon, when she said she had a client meeting downtown, I followed her at a distance. Instead of going to her office or a restaurant, she entered a high-rise building that housed several law firms. I looked at the directory in the lobby after she had gone up and confirmed that Arthur Goldstein Family Law Specialist had an office on the 12th floor. The final devastating discovery came when I noticed unusual activity in our joint savings account. Jessica had withdrawn $20,000 over the past month in increments small enough not to trigger my immediate attention. When questioned, she claimed it was for a marketing conference she was planning to attend, but no such conference appeared on her calendar. As painful as these discoveries were, nothing prepared me for what I found next. While searching for a document in our home office, I accidentally opened an email chain between Jessica and Marcus, one of my business partners. The messages were intimate and clearly indicated they had been having an affair for months. "Once this divorce is final, we will not have to hide anymore," Jessica had written. Imagine the look on his face when he realizes his wife and business partner have been planning this all along. Marcus had replied, "Just stick to the plan. Get half the company in the settlement, and we can use that leverage to push him out completely. This time next year, it will all be ours." I read through dozens of messages, each one a knife in my heart. The two people I trusted most had not only betrayed me emotionally, but were actively plotting to take everything I had built. There were even discussions about how they would redecorate our house after I was gone. I spent several sleepless nights processing this betrayal. How could I have missed the signs? The woman sleeping peacefully beside me was a stranger, someone planning my financial and emotional destruction. My partner in business, a man I had trusted with my livelihood, was conspiring behind my back. The anger, pain, and disbelief were overwhelming. I cycled through grief, rage, and fear. Everything I had worked for was at risk. More than that, my entire reality had been shattered. The future I had envisioned disappeared overnight, replaced by the prospect of a bitter legal battle and the loss of my marriage, my business, and possibly my home. After the initial shock wore off, I knew I needed professional guidance. I researched divorce attorneys and found Eleanor Reynolds, reputed to be one of the best in San Francisco. I scheduled a consultation during my lunch break and paid in cash to avoid leaving a paper trail. Eleanor listened attentively as I explained my situation, including the evidence I had gathered about Jessica and Marcus. Her advice was clear: California is a community property state, which typically means assets acquired during marriage are split 50-50. However, there are legal ways to protect yourself, especially given the circumstances you have described. She explained that while I could not hide assets, I could take steps to document and secure what was rightfully mine. The inheritance I had received from my parents 2 years ago, which I had kept in a separate account, would not be considered community property if I could prove it had not been commingled with our joint funds. I also learned that my contributions to the company prior to our marriage would be considered separate property if properly documented. Eleanor advised me to gather all records related to the founding of the business, including initial investments, and create a clear timeline showing my involvement before we were married. With Eleanor's guidance, I developed a strategic plan. First, I moved my inheritance money from a joint investment account back to my personal account. This was completely legal since it was technically my separate property, but Jessica had been gradually moving it into accounts with her name attached. I gathered extensive documentation proving my early contributions to the company before our marriage. I found original business plans, emails, and financial records, showing I had developed the core technology and secured initial funding while still single. This would be crucial in establishing that a portion of the company value was my separate property. I also began recording all instances of Jessica's secret financial activities. I documented the unexplained withdrawals from our joint accounts and kept copies of the bank statements. I backed up the emails between Jessica and Marcus, ensuring they could not be deleted or denied later. Given Marcus's involvement, I knew I needed to protect the company as well. I scheduled a private meeting with our third partner, Daniel, who was completely unaware of the situation. Initially shocked and disbelieving, he became furious when I showed him the evidence of Marcus's betrayal. Together, we reviewed the company bylaws and consulted with our corporate attorney about removing Marcus from his position due to his breach of fiduciary duty. I changed passwords to my personal accounts and created new secure email addresses for important communications. I made copies of all essential documents and stored them in a safe deposit box that only I could access. I cataloged our household valuables and kept an eye on anything that might mysteriously disappear. Throughout this process, I maintained a normal facade at home. I continued to leave for work at the same time, came home for dinner, and acted as though nothing had changed. Jessica remained equally deceptive, playing the role of devoted wife while continuing her clandestine meetings with Marcus and her divorce attorney. The board meeting where we confronted Marcus was tense, but necessary. Daniel and I, along with our corporate counsel, presented evidence of his breach of duty to the company. Marcus denied everything at first, but when faced with the emails and testimony from staff who had witnessed inappropriate interactions, he had no defense. The board voted to remove him from his position and initiated the process to buy out his shares at a significantly reduced valuation due to his misconduct. Jessica remained unaware of these developments at the company. She continued her preparations, clearly believing her plan was proceeding perfectly. I observed her growing more confident, occasionally making cryptic comments about big changes coming soon, and asking subtle questions about company developments. Then, exactly as I had anticipated 2 weeks after I had secured my assets, Jessica had her lawyer file for divorce. The papers were served to me at the office, a calculated move designed to humiliate me in front of my colleagues. The filing demanded 50% of all marital assets, including my stake in the company ownership of our house, and substantial alimony payments. What Jessica did not know was that I had been expecting this exact moment. When her lawyer called to arrange the first settlement discussion, expecting to find me devastated and unprepared, he was instead connected to Eleanor Reynolds. The confidence in his voice noticeably diminished when she informed him that we had substantial evidence of infidelity, conspiracy, and attempted fraud. Jessica's face when she realized her plan had failed was something I will never forget. She had expected to catch me off guard, to find me emotional and willing to give up anything for a quick resolution. Instead, she found herself facing a prepared opponent with documentation of her affair, financial misconduct, and conspiracy with Marcus. The final confrontation with Jessica happened at our home the day after she was informed that her initial settlement offer had been rejected. She arrived expecting to collect some personal belongings, assuming I would not be there. When she saw me sitting calmly in the living room, she froze. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Long enough," I replied. "Long enough to hear you planning with my business partner. Long enough to see you withdraw money from our accounts. Long enough to read your emails discussing how to time the divorce for maximum financial benefit." I laid out the evidence on the coffee table between us, photographs of her meeting with the attorney, bank statements showing her withdrawals, printouts of emails between her and Marcus. Her face paled as she realized the extent of what I had discovered. "You and Marcus were not as clever as you thought," I continued. "The company board removed him last week. Your plan to take control of my business failed before you even filed for divorce." Jessica's carefully constructed facade crumbled. Tears of frustration, not remorse, streamed down her face as she realized her schemes had backfired completely. She attempted to switch tactics, claiming she still loved me and that Marcus had manipulated her. When that did not work, she turned to threats and accusations. "You will still lose everything," she hissed. "California law is on my side." "Actually, the law is on the side of truth," I replied calmly. "Your documented conspiracy changes everything." The divorce proceedings were nothing like what Jessica had envisioned. Rather than a quick settlement giving her half of everything, the process became a detailed examination of her misconduct. The judge took special interest in the evidence, showing she had been planning the divorce specifically to coincide with a potential increase in my company's value. In the end, the court awarded a fair division of our truly shared assets. Jessica received none of my inheritance, a significantly smaller percentage of the company than she had demanded, and no alimony, due to her documented affair with Marcus. She was permitted to keep her personal property and a reasonable settlement that reflected her actual contributions to our marriage. As for Marcus, his professional reputation was severely damaged by the exposure of his actions. Several clients left our company upon learning of his behavior, but most stayed after meeting with me and Daniel to discuss the situation openly. Marcus attempted to start a competing business, but without access to our proprietary technology, and with his damaged reputation, he struggled to find investors. The months following the divorce were some of the most difficult of my life despite the legal victory. I found myself alone in a house filled with memories, questioning every moment of my 8-year marriage. Had any of it been real? Had she ever truly loved me? The doubt and pain would hit me in waves, often when I least expected it. I joined a support group for people going through divorce and found comfort in sharing my story with others who understood the unique pain of betrayal. Many had similar experiences of discovering their spouses had been planning divorces strategically, though few had faced the double betrayal of a spouse and business partner conspiring together. I threw myself into work using the creative energy that had once gone into my marriage to drive innovation at the company. Daniel and I restructured the organization, brought in new talent, and within a year we had recovered from the disruption caused by Marcus's departure. In fact, without his constant undermining that I now recognized in hindsight, the company thrived and expanded into new markets. I reconnected with friends and family members who had taken a back seat during my marriage. My brother convinced me to join him on a 3-week hiking trip through the mountains of Colorado, a physical challenge that helped clear my mind and gain perspective. My parents, who had always had reservations about Jessica that they had kept to themselves, provided emotional support without ever saying "I told you so." I found unexpected healing in volunteer work, particularly mentoring young entrepreneurs at a local business incubator. Helping others navigate the early challenges of starting a company provided a sense of purpose beyond my own problems. I also started a small foundation to provide legal assistance to people facing divorce who could not afford quality representation. Gradually, I began dating again, approaching new relationships with both greater caution and greater authenticity. I was more direct about my expectations and boundaries, and more attentive to subtle warning signs. I did not allow my experience with Jessica to make me bitter, but I did let it make me wiser. A year and a half after the divorce, I bought a new house, in a different neighborhood, a fresh start, without daily reminders of my failed marriage. I designed the space to reflect my own tastes and interests, including a music room for the piano playing I had abandoned during my marriage, and a spacious kitchen for rediscovering my love of cooking. Through this painful experience, I learned invaluable lessons about trust, intuition, and self-protection. I realized that my instincts had been warning me about Jessica's behavior long before I consciously acknowledged the problems. Now, I listened to that inner voice without dismissing it. I learned that financial transparency is essential in any partnership, personal or professional. I established clear protocols in my business to prevent any similar betrayals in the future, and I approach personal relationships with the same openness and expectation of honesty. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that recovery from betrayal is possible. The pain does not disappear completely, but it transforms into wisdom. The experience changed how I view relationships, but it did not destroy my capacity for trust or love. 3 years after the divorce, I unexpectedly ran into Jessica at a coffee shop. She looked tired and much older than her years. I later learned that Marcus had eventually betrayed her too, leaving her for someone else after draining their shared resources on failed business ventures. In that moment, I realized I no longer felt anger toward her, only a sense of sadness for what could have been and genuine pity for the person she had become. California law is on my side. Actually, the law is on the side of truth, I replied calmly. Your documented conspiracy changes everything. The divorce proceedings were nothing like what Jessica had envisioned. Rather than a quick settlement giving her half of everything, the process became a detailed examination of her misconduct. Have you ever experienced warning signs in a relationship that you initially ignored? What finally made you pay attention? Please, share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life lessons. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that there is life and success after betrayal. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings.